Hello everyone, welcome back to the Let's Dream Civils YouTube channel. Today we are going to discuss about the Bhatkal Estuary Tragedy. This is an important topic for GS Paper 1 Geography, GS 3 Disaster Management and Environment, GS 4 Administrative Responsibility. Now let's look into the Bhatkal Estuary incident. It is a socio-hydrological disaster, means it is a disaster caused by the complex two-way interaction between the natural water systems and the human societies. So what is the news? On May 24, 2026, 10 local residents, predominantly women from an extended family of the Naik community, drowned in the Kalinati stream estuary near Shirali in Bhatkal, Uttara Kannada. So in this map, you can spot the Bhatkal, which has this Kalinati stream estuary. So now let's look into the sequence of events. So these people have entered the estuary during low tide to harvest the clams and mussels, a traditional livelihood activity. So you can harvest clams and mussels only when there is a low tide. So they have entered the estuary during the low tide. But then a sudden surge in water levels triggered by overnight rains and high tides swept them away. Even though they entered during low tide, suddenly the water levels have surged because of overnight rains and high tide, which caused them to get trapped in the estuarine slush and drown. So, before understanding the tragedy, we must understand what an estuary is. So, an estuary is a semi closed coastal water body where the fresh water stream from the river meet the ocean water. So, the fresh water stream mixes with the ocean water, so that place is called as an estuary. So, unlike delta, sediment is constantly flushed by tidal currents. In deltas, the sediments are accumulated, but here in estuaries, the sediments are constantly flushed by the tidal currents into the sea. The Bhatkal's topography. The Bhatkal has rivers which are short, fast flowing, steep, and west flowing rivers of the Western Ghats, like the Kalinati and Venkatapura streams. So these short, fast flowing rivers carry a massive velocity directly onto the Arabian Sea. So when this short, fast flowing rivers carry a huge mass of water directly into the sea, right? It causes an effect called as tidal funneling. What is that? So when tides enter through a narrow estuary mouth into a vast ocean, the speed of the water amplifies the water inflow into the ocean and also the shear force of current. So this is called as the tidal funneling effect. So the scientific reason behind the sudden tidal surge in this particular incident is rain runoff volume. So heavy localized overnight rain dramatically increased the river discharge. When this fast flowing freshwater meets the sea, it swells the narrow estuary channels suddenly. And then there was high tide convergence as well. So during the astronomical high tide, seawater is pushed forcefully inwards. So massive amount of water flowing downstream towards ocean due to heavy rain and seawater moving inland due to high tide caused the water levels to rise in the estuary area. So as you can see, this is the estuary area. So when there is massive amount of water flowing downstream towards the ocean because of a heavy overnight rain and due to high tide convergence, the sea tides are moving inland. So which causes the level of water to increase in this estuary mouth area. So this is the reason for this sudden tidal surge. And then estuarine slush trap. So the river tides constantly deposit the soft mud and slid in the estuaries. So when trapped in rising water, the human feet sink into this dense clayey slush, preventing escape and drastically increasing the likelihood of drowning. So estuaries are ecologically productive but geographically hazardous environments. And also, one important thing to note here is many disasters occur not because of one factor but because of multiple factors interacting simultaneously. So, when this happens, it is called as compound disaster. Now let's see the estuarine ecosystems and livelihoods. Many coastal communities depend on shellfish collection and bivalve economics for survival. So first, what is that sustenance activity? Collecting clams, oysters, and mussels, which is called as bivalves, is a traditional seasonal livelihood activity for marginalized coastal communities in India. And these organisms thrive in the intertidal zones of estuaries. And so, what is intertidal zones of estuaries? Where there are tides from different streams of water, from river stream and also from the ocean stream. So, these organisms thrive in the intertidal zones of estuaries. They are basically anchored to rocks or buried in the sand or brackish sediment. So, basically, we can access them only during the low tides. The socio-economic vulnerability that we can see in this estuarine ecosystem and livelihood is that there is huge reliance on the hand gathering methods without life jackets and signaling deep rooted economic insecurity and lack of safety awareness for these communities. The major disaster vulnerability here is undetected hydrometeorological hazards. The coastal zones face unpredictable localized rain pattern. So the rain pattern will not be constant throughout the entire coastal area. So there will be unpredictable localized rain pattern. But the broader weather forecasting system often miss the small micro local estuary basins, which leaves these marginal gatherers without any early warning. The collective panic multiplier. The reports indicated that the victims held their hands and tried to rescue each other in fear, unintentionally pulling each other down. So, this highlights a classic hazard behavior of collective panic in water bodies. Lack of coastal safety infrastructure. There were no warning boats, no tide schedule charts at estuary entry points, and there were no local coast guards who can rescue them. So, these are all lack of coastal safety infrastructure. The emergency response and framework. So the first responders were the local fishermen who immediately rescued three survivors. This underlines the importance of community led response. And then comes the state disaster response force and local emergency teams who deployed the boats to recover the bodies of the victims under challenging currents. And what is the institutional structure we have in the disaster management? So, the disaster management in India relies heavily on a hierarchy model from NDMA, that is National Disaster Management Authority. Then comes the State Disaster Management Authority, and then comes the District Disaster Management Authority, which is led by the district magistrate or a collector. Policy and the preventive measures, like what we can do to prevent this from happening in the future. The first identified gap was lack of tide awareness. So we have to develop and display dynamic, localized, color coded tide charts at crucial estuary entry points. And then absence of life saving gear. So the government has to distribute low cost, high visibility personal flotation device to bivalve gathering locals. There was a delayed emergency alert. So when they were trapped, the emergency alert was delayed. So to avoid that, we have to establish mobile based SMS or a broadcast alert network with the help of village panchayat for localized weather changes. And then absence of professional rescuers. We have to train and register the coastal youth as community lifeguards under the Aapda Mitra scheme of NDMA. Aapda Mitra means a friend in disaster. So it is a flagship initiative by the National Disaster Management Authority to train the community volunteers. What is the ethical and administrative lesson that we are learning here? So instead of imposing strict bans on entering the estuaries to protect the life, we have to adopt a safe enablement approach rather than a heavy handed restrictive ban, because when we restrict them, it will directly strip these marginalized families of their traditional source of sustenance. And then, even though the state government announced rupees 5 lakh and PMNRF has announced 2 lakh ex gratia to the deceased families, the systemic administrative focus should shift from post disaster compensation to active hazard prevention and climate resilience investments. Thank you, everyone. If you uh, like this video, kindly subscribe to the channel for more such informative videos. Thank you.